Hi, I'm Kent Working. This is Utah Valley Live, and another in the series on home ownership. Today's question and title to the show is home ownership the American dream? And so I'm going to address that for the next little while. So today is Wednesday, March 3rd, 2025. And last night we had some conversation from the President of the United States about renewing the American dream, which is kind of coincidental because I've been intending to do this episode in the series about the American dream for the last 4 or 5 days. And so it might feel like I'm just coming on top of what President Trump had to say, but not really. It's actually been a thought of mine, and I think I mentioned it in the first episode, is home ownership a right? In that I've been thinking about how I perceived the American dream growing up. Now, I had a decent education in Newport Beach, California. I didn't get great grades in high school. I kind of remember some of the stuff I learned, but somehow I missed out on what many people felt was the American dream. And so as I got older, I actually ended up working in the mortgage industry, and perhaps I was just somebody who had paid attention to the marketing slogans, but I began to connote that home ownership was what epitomized. It was what the American dream was all about. So I was a little surprised when I started doing some research on this topic and tried to figure out just what it is that is the American dream. So the American dream, apparently that phrase, was popularized in 1931 by an author, James Truslow Adams, wrote a book, The Epic of America, 452 pages, of which you can find online. And I just did a word search for American Dream to pull some of his thoughts about the American Dream and what it means, as far as, I'm going to move the microphone a little bit, as far as, and I'm also going to turn it down. I'm still getting this figured out. Sorry, folks. I know I was picking up an awful lot of ambient noise, along with being too loud. And I've been accused of being too loud before. So, during the Great Depression, 1931, one of the things he said, and he said many in this book, that dream of a land in which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement, is not a dream of motor cars and high wages merely, but a dream of social order, in which each man and each woman shall be able to attain to the fullest stature of which they are innately capable, and be recognized by others for what they are, regardless of the fortuitous circumstances of position or birth. Actually, it says a birth or position. So that's just one of the things. And that was what actually got me on this journey, was reading through that one thought. And I was going to leave it at that and say, oh, it's changed. But it actually became pretty interesting. So I'm going to read some other sections of that same book, along with eventually something about President Trump and President Ronald Reagan. I don't have the citations on these other than it's from the book, The Epic of America. That American dream of a better, richer, and happier life for all our citizens of every rank, which is the greatest contribution we have as yet made to the thought and welfare of the world. That dream or hope has been present from the start. Ever since we became an independent nation, each generation has seen an uprising of the ordinary Americans to save that dream from the forces which appeared to be overwhelming and dispelling it. Possibly the greatest of these struggles lies just ahead of us at this present time. Not a struggle of revolutionists against established order, but of the ordinary man to hold fast to those rights of, quote, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which were vouchsafed to us in the past in vision and on parchment. Another section. The American dream was beginning to take form in the hearts of men. The economic motive was unquestionably powerful, often dominant in the minds of those who took part in the Great Migration. But mixed with this was also frequently present the hope of a better and a freer life, a life in which a man might think as he would and develop as he willed. The migration was not like so many earlier ones in history, led by warrior lords with followers dependent on them, but was one in which the common man, as well as the leader, was hoping for greater freedom and happiness for himself and his children. Another section. If a distinction had developed between rich and poor, nevertheless, even the poor were better off, freer and more independent than they had been in Europe. After all, they had glimpsed the American dream. English, Irish, Scotch, Germans, and Dutch like me, or at least my ancestors, all of whom had come to our shores, had come to first to find security and self-expression. They had come with a new dynamic hope of rising and growing, of hewing out for themselves a life in which they would not only succeed as men, but be recognized as men. A life not only of economic prosperity, but of social and self-esteem. The dream derived little assistance from the leaders in America. It was arising from the depths of the common mass of men, and beginning to spread like a contagion among the depressed in the old world. It was already beginning to meet with opposition from the quote-unquote upper classes in the new, but it was steadily and irresistibly taking possession of the hearts and minds of the ordinary American. It was his star in the west which led him on over the stormy seas and into the endless forests in search of a home where toil would reap a sure reward and no dead hands of custom or exaction would push him back into, quote-unquote, his place. I think I need my glasses. So what I gathered as I was going through this, and perhaps you might notice also, and we are going to talk about Jefferson here in just a minute. Let me read it. Jefferson, the apostle of the American dream, did not believe in the possibility of realizing it except in a country in which the vast bulk of citizens were independent farmers owning their own farms. All right, so that's the point that I want to talk about right now. So if we look at the American dream as it was a region, as what drew people to this country, in the minds of the founders, and for many who were coming from mostly Western Europe, it was the idea that, wait a minute, I can't own land in my home country, or I don't have a possibility because I'm maybe not the right caste or class, but if I go to America, I can trudge into the forest, out to the prairies, and I can get a piece of land, and I can make for myself what I will through hard work and effort. And so it was that idea of citizens owning, the Jeffersonian idea that citizens would own their own land and would, because they had the opportunity, be able to work hard and obtain success. All right. More back to our book, Epic in America. The fact that opportunity appeared at least to be open to everyone kept alive the belief in the American dream. And the American dream, the belief in the value of the common man and the hope of opening every avenue of opportunity to him. So people came to this country with hope. It's a land of opportunity. You know, I was born in the 50s. It was well established by then, and none of these things, even though my grandfather immigrated from the Netherlands in 1908, I didn't know him well, and so I didn't pick up any sense of coming to America from him. He was too old, and I wasn't around him enough. And my father was born and raised here, and of course wouldn't have had the same feeling. And so this magnet, this opportunity to come to America, the hope of a chance at success, of bettering one's life, drew people from around the world. All right, let's go back to what he had to say. The first great impact of an industrial era on our life came at a time when the old Americanism of the democratic ideal, the American dream that life should be made richer and fuller for everyone, and opportunity to remain open to all, had been kept alive by constant waves of thought and emotion flooding back from our successive frontiers. Industrialism was to encounter the mentality not of a people emerging from feudalism, but one of emerging from the exceptionally free and optimistic life of the frontier. So, while he's not saying it, what appears to me is that the Industrial Revolution in the United States then changed the American dream. Factories and those who, as people pushed westward, those were the ones seeking the opportunities. Those without opportunities were still perhaps working in poor circumstances in the Northeast. And yet, as he's explaining, the industrial age changed how Americans were to view the American dream. They were no longer interested, or the opportunity didn't exist for most to go get their own farm and work hard. Instead, they had to work for their existence. A little more. We have a long and arduous road to travel if we are to realize our American dream in the life of our nation. But if we fail, there is nothing left but the old eternal round. The alternative is the failure of self-government, the failure of the common man to rise to full stature, the failure of all that the American dream has held of hope and promise for mankind. So there's an introduction here that I'd never thought about. I mean, one, we go back to, while we may be a republic of the United States built on democratic principles, this introduces a side to it that I hadn't paid that much attention to, that the eternal round that he's referencing, I'm pretty sure from other segments, is referencing the land barons, the rich, those who have means, not the common man, the uncommon man, who has the ability to do as he wishes because of his wealth, assets, and influence. And so that was, as he's kind of stating it, and it comes out again in just a minute, I'm going to read from Ronald Reagan's speech, that it's this hope for the common man that could come to a land of freedom where he has a vote, and he has an equal vote in theory, and that he has opportunity. That drew people. And it was also seen by many, including this author, as kind of the best thing possible for mankind. Otherwise, we go back into the cycle of the rich and the poor. All right. So Ronald Reagan, on January 19th, 1989, and this is available again online from his library. So January 19th, 1989, he gave a speech, and it was to award presidential medal to a couple guys, and which aren't important to what I'm talking about. But he ended up talking about immigration, and so there is a quote here that I'm going to go with, and it starts like this: "It is bold men and women yearning for freedom and opportunity who leave their homelands and come to a new country to start their lives over. They believe in the American dream. And over they make it come true for themselves, for their children, and for others. They give more than they receive. They labor and succeed. And often they are entrepreneurs. But their greatest contribution is more than economic, because they understand in a special way how glorious it is to be an American. They renew our pride and gratitude in the United States of America, the greatest, freest nation in the world, the last, best hope of man on earth. So, sure, politicians say political type things that people want to hear on one hand. On the other hand, he didn't have anything left in his presidency. This was one of his last speeches, if not the last speech he made as the president. And it was about immigration, as he wanted to address the American dream, and seconds this notion that the American dream is the hope of the world, not necessarily the democracy that we push, but what's underneath it is the opportunity that's available, which is often accompanied by democracy, or enabled by democracy. So, with that in mind, the question then comes up: what is if the American dream is the American dream is the opportunity, is the sense that one can succeed in life. Well, if that's the case, then are we there? Well, I'll dig a little further. So there's a guy who wrote a book, Robert D. Putnam, called Our Kids, The American Dream in Crisis. The American Dream has lots of books written about it. It's common. And this is a blurb from it or about it. I'm not sure which one. It's the American dream. Get a good education, work hard, buy a house, and achieve prosperity and success. This is the America we believe in, a nation of opportunity constrained only by ability and effort. So there's an introduction here on Putnam's view of the American dream, which ties back into homeownership. He includes the American dream: get a good education, work hard, buy a house. Well, that's not actually the original context of the American dream, and so because of that, we see it changing, morphing, as we can't all go out and buy a farm. When James Truslow Adams was talking about it in 1931, well, it was the Depression. I mean, things were pretty rough. They needed a dream. It was a good idea to have a dream. So if we come along and have now included homeownership as one of the identifiers, one of the goals of the American dream, well, how well are we doing at that? So, according to some census numbers or other things I pulled out of the air, or off the interwebs, in 1900, 46.5% of the population owned their own home. In 1910, it drops to 45.9. 1920, 45.6. 1930, 47.8. 1940, 43.6. Well, we had a couple world wars in there, so it didn't budge much out of the 40s. But by 1950, we see an uptick. By 1950, of course, the troops have returned home. The Korean conflict hasn't started yet. At the same time, that's when in the 50s, of course, starting in the 40s, we have the baby boom. Got to have houses, lots of opportunity. All those hardworking people out there building houses and starting businesses. By 1960, we've gone to 61.9% homeownership. And then it doesn't move a ton over the next 60 years. Sure, 1970 goes to 62.9, 1980, 64.4, drops a little bit to 1990, 1990 to 64.2, and in 2000, 66.2, and then the most recent number that I picked up just from 2022 was 65.8. So it dropped a little bit, but we're hovering around 66. And from the last episode, where Canada, England, other countries are kind of around the same amount. So what does that mean? What does it mean if home ownership becomes one of the biggest identifiers, or one of the goals to attain to in pursuit of the American dream, when only 2/3 of folks actually own? And I'm assuming, I haven't checked it, but I'm assuming that since there's census numbers, everything else, that's households. Otherwise, you have children into that calculation, and spouses, etc. So, have we really moved off the idea of the American dream being about opportunity to succeed into home ownership? Well, there has been a generational shift. Millennials and Gen Z are redefining. I think this is coming off of some AI that I'm reading. Millennials and Gen Z are redefining the American dream, placing more value on community, family, and personal achievements rather than home ownership. Economic factors, high mortgage rates, property taxes, and a shortage of homes contribute to the current housing crisis, making it difficult for younger generations to buy homes. All right, let me address high interest rates. When I started as a loan officer in 1985, fixed-rate mortgages were at 13%. What's the difference? Well, your house prices were probably a third of what they are now. And so, and the wages were lower too. But our current 6 or 7% 30-year fixed rate is not the worst in my lifetime by far. But it's still, because of house prices, makes it hard, which is part of what this whole series is about, is addressing home ownership. And we had a focus last night. I didn't listen to Trump's speech to Congress, but I did read the transcript. And so I tried to pull out some ideas, since it was entitled Renewing the American Dream. And so this is kind of part of the bits and pieces that I pulled. Renewing the American Dream, restore common sense, safety, optimism, and wealth all across our wonderful land. Get dramatic and immediate relief to working families. It drove the necessities of life out of something drove the necessities of life out of reach for millions and millions of Americans. Making America affordable again is the goal. Defeat inflation, bring down mortgage rates, lower car payments and grocery prices, protect our seniors, and put more money in the pockets of American families. We are going to create the highest quality of life, build the safest and wealthiest and healthiest and most vital communities anywhere in the world. We are going to renew unlimited promise of the American dream. So most of those statements are addressing economic circumstances rather than the context of hope or opportunity, until the very last one, the unlimited promise of the American dream. And so many people smarter than me, more educated on the topic than I am, will have really wise things to say about the American dream. But what I'm going to say is that the American dream is still a magnet. I suspect that people who come here both via legal means with appropriate documentation, and those who arrive here otherwise, are pretty much all seeking the same thing. It is a draw. It hasn't changed for most of this country's existence. They are looking for the opportunity to create a better life. So we're going to shift away from the theoretical and go down to a little bit more of the foundational, meaning the house aspect. It is hard for young people and old people. Let's be clear. It's hard to buy a house right now if you don't have a bunch of money already packed into an existing property. So, in fact, just as a reminder, should I do it? Let's see, where are we at? Yeah, let's take a look so people know we're actually in Utah Valley. Here, let's do this. There we are, beautiful Orem, Utah. And